I have a problem. South Park is one of the biggest adult animated shows in history, sitting alongside The Simpsons and Family Guy in the long-running sitcom family. It's also one of my all-time favourite shows. I didn't start watching until pretty late into the show's life, however. Obviously. The show's first season was made a whole 5 years before I was even a dirty fort, and to anybody who watched the episode live as it aired, you probably feel really old right now. I had known about the show ever since The Stick of Truth came out and I watched Jacksepticeye play it. I didn't even realize it was a show until a few months later, and the only method I knew where I could watch the episodes was those live streams on YouTube. I actually do remember a few of those episodes. Season 15's A History Channel Thanksgiving and Season 16's Faith Healing stick out in my head like a sore thumb. I actually have really fond memories of watching those streams for hours and hours until 3 in the morning, falling asleep, and then just kind of forgetting about the show entirely. I knew it existed, and I did eventually play the game. Illegally, but I never went out of my way to watch the show. That is, until the end of high school, when I found out that it was on Amazon Prime and started watching random episodes. That's when the addiction started. I quickly fell in love with the cast of characters, the variety of the episodes, and the length the creators would go to put out their message. After only a handful of South Park episodes, I bought the Season 5 DVD, a season I hadn't watched any of at that point. And then I got another. And another. And another. And another. And yeah, you can kinda see what happened. For those who somehow don't know, South Park is an adult animated sitcom about five boys. Stan, Kyle, Cartman, Kenny, and eventually, Butters. Episodes usually revolve around their lives in the titular town. In the earlier seasons, there was a focus on the paranormal, aliens, folklore, the personification of death, talking fecal matter. In the later seasons, its focus has definitely shifted a bit more to the adult and current political events, but at its core, South Park is these 5 boys fighting Mecha Streisand, or delivering a DVD, or killing 2 innocent people, chopping them up, mixing them into chili, and then feeding them to their kid as revenge. I feel like the best place to start when talking about this show would be the comedy. I mean, if it wasn't funny, it wouldn't be a very good situational comedy now, would it? Yeah, I know, comedy is subjective and everything, but in my opinion, South Park is probably the funniest show to ever be created. So what makes it so funny? Jokes! I don't really know how I could explain any further with that. South Park just has some really good jokes. There are so many different types of jokes they use in each and every episode, and those jokes flow effortlessly with the story. As an example, Season 8's Awesom-O is probably the funniest episode in the show's catalogue, and all it really has to do to accomplish that is move the story along. I'm gonna say this now before I continue, I highly recommend watching these episodes before continuing with this video. Not because the stories are so good that I don't want to spoil them for you, but because the jokes are going to hit so much harder if it's your first time experiencing them. You can watch the show on HBO Max, Paramount Plus, or you can do what I did and buy a bunch of DVDs of the show and watch it that way. Or I guess you can pirate it, but you know, whatever works for you. Awesom-O starts with a really basic setup. Butters, the impressionable and innocent kid, excitedly opens a package that was left for him. Inside the box is Awesom-O, a robot designed to do his bidding. Little does Butters know that inside that robot is Cartman, pulling a prank on him by finding out embarrassing details with plans to tell everyone. And actually, I'm just gonna let this scene play out.
And he's never gonna get me again, cause what Cartman doesn't know is that I know one of his secrets. What? When Cartman is playing all alone in his backyard, he likes to dress up like Britney Spears and pretend he's her. He sings and dances around with a life-size cutout of Justin Timberlake. You saw that?
And there we have the first pillar of the comedy of the episode. Irony. Cartman has come to embarrass Butters, but instead he's put in a situation where if he doesn't continue his character, he's going to get shamed himself. Which, when one of your characters is as big of a piece of shit as Cartman is, it's something hard not to laugh at. But the best part is that this is just the beginning. Matt and Trey have established the inciting incident for the episode, and now has the goal to run as far with it as possible and take it to the most extreme places they can. Through the rest of the episode, Cartman is forced to do his chores, help with his medicine, dragged across the country, is forced to come up with great movie ideas for Hollywood executives.
Adam Sandler is like in love with some girl, but then it turns out that the girl is actually a golden retriever or something.
And finally, gets kidnapped by the American government who want to drill into his robot's brain and reprogram it to work with the army. And he still doesn't give up the act. This all falls apart not when people take off the box or he tells everyone the truth, but when...
I think maybe one day we can all... Wait a minute, did that robot just fart?
Hey, robots don't fart.
Now ending fart sequence.
Hang on a second here.
This is fucking stupid. And it's one of the funniest episodes in the show's run. Not just because of how ridiculous the story is, but because of how effortlessly the jokes flow within the narrative. Another big pillar of South Park's comedy is satire and parody. Hell, it's practically what SP is known for. Satire is woven into its DNA. Sometimes it's plain and simple parody of media, like in The Losing Edge or You Have Zero Friends. The rest of the time when the show uses satire, it's to look at current day events through a different lens, sometimes very heavy and taboo events. That's something I'll talk more in depth about in a little bit, but when it comes to the comedy, it's fair to say that South Park utilizes it really well. The return of the Fellowship of the Ring to the Two Towers from Season 5 has got to be one of the funniest examples, parodying The Lord of the Rings, and the best part is that you don't need to have watched the films or read the books for it to still be an amazing episode. I would know, because I didn't watch Lord of the Rings until about 8 months ago. Don't judge me. The story starts when Stan, Kyle, and Cartman are asked to take a videotape to Butter's house. When they begin their journey, Randy and Sharon turn on another tape they bought from the rental store. It's porn! As it turns out, they gave them the wrong tape. Realizing the boys are delivering Lord of the Rings, they run to stop them, but find out they've already delivered it, and Butters... Do I even need to say it? The boys are then asked to retrieve it and deliver it back to them. After seeing how the video changed Butters, they assume it's evil, and after another casualty,
I'm not playing anymore.
Decide it's best to return it to the video store. But with an army of 6th graders after the tape, their quest will not be easy. At face value, this episode's story is a really simple setup with an amazing payoff. Like I said before, you don't need to have watched any Lord of the Ring films for the jokes to be funny or for the story to still be engaging. It's a perfectly good story about kids playing fantasy, with some hilarious jokes sprinkled throughout. But if you have watched or read Lord of the Rings, there's a plethora of references that elevate the experience. Butters acting like Gollum after seeing the tape itself being an insert for the One Ring, and the boys hiding behind the log from the teenagers referencing this scene from the film are all great examples. It's clear that Matt and Trey were big fans of Lord of the Rings at the time while creating this episode, because the amount of parallels to the films are amazing. But admittedly, I think a part of the magic of this episode is that you don't need to know these films or books before going in. You can start the episode and watch it and not need to know a single thing about Lord of the Rings and still have a great experience. In season 25, Matt Stone and Trey Parker did the funniest thing anybody has ever done in TV. They gaslit the entire audience, retconning a name for a character they had been using since the show's first episodes. So, who did they rename? They renamed Token to Tolkien, after J.R.R. Tolkien, and in doing so, they went back and resubbed all of the subtitles and changed every mention of Token to Tolkien on their official site as a way to further gaslight both the current audience and future audiences. That's pretty funny. South Park's comedy is S tier, but what tops even that is how the SP team write a story. And holy shit, can they write a damn good story. It's at this point in the video where I get to talk about nerd shit. Writing nerd shit. Nerd shit for writing. There are many great storytellers out there with different methods and guidelines that they follow. But out of all of them, Trey Parker and Matt Stone's but therefore rule has got to be my favorite. For those who don't know, the but therefore rule is a method of writing that allows the written work to carry a consistent and meaningful narrative while simultaneously creating organic tension. And saying that sentence out loud feels like writing "kick me" on the back of all my shirts, but let's pretend I'm not a loser for the next 5 minutes and use a random episode of the show as an example. I'm thinking The List from season 11. The boys are eating lunch in the cafeteria, but Butters runs in shouting about a list that the girls made ranking the boys from cutest to ugliest, acting as the inciting incident for the episode. Therefore, the boys want to see the list, but the girls won't tell. Therefore, the boys devise a plan to steal the list. But that plan fails, because as the boys learn, girls don't have balls. Therefore, they try another plan. There's a lot more buts and therefores that run through the entire episode, and it ends in a climactic final scene that feels earned. You, the viewer, know exactly why and how you got here, and the script didn't need to pull some random "and then" out of its ass to get you there. It feels like it glided along a natural path, the tension was built organically. Nearly every episode of South Park is written like this, and it's no surprise that the worst episodes are the times where they break this rule. A part of the show I'll talk a bit more in detail about later is season 20, but one of the big turning points in that season was when Mr. Garrison became president, even though the story was clearly going in a very different direction. And since it was initially going in a very different direction, Matt and Trey not only had to use a "and then", but they had to use the biggest, most colossal "and then" that could have ever been and then. Multiple storylines trailed off into random directions, and the season ended in a mess known as the end of serialization as we know it. Case in point, the but therefore rule is very important to South Park. In the last section I talked about satire, but I didn't mention how important it also is for South Park storytelling. For example, Margaritaville from season 13 is an episode about the 2008 global financial crisis. In the episode, the banks collapse and everyone's money is now practically worthless. Randy thinks he sees the problem, that frivolous spending is the cause of the recession, seeing the economy as some sort of deity that they've upset. This idea becomes popular in the town, and everyone starts following Randy's words, wearing bed sheets instead of clothes, and riding llamas instead of driving cars, spending as little money as possible. Meanwhile, Kyle brings up his own theory, that to appease the economy, you need to spend more, showing your faith in said economy. Eventually, the episode evolves into a parallel of the story of Jesus Christ's crucifixion, with Kyle playing the role of Jesus. How ironic. Paying for everybody's sins, debts, to show that the economy is man-made. An idea made up by people. They even have a Last Supper of their own. Except, they eat pizza, so it's way cooler. The whole episode, while a great commentary on economics, is also just really funny. A must-watch episode, and one I recommend if you want to get into the show. Making TV is hard. Whether it's live action, animated, a talk show, anything. Making an episode of a show is a difficult, lengthy task that requires dozens of writers, artists, sound designers, actors, and more. All working for months and months and months, at times just to make a single 10-minute show, let alone 20 minutes. Now, okay, imagine all of that being made in less than a week. South Park is different from a lot of animated shows for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that episodes have a very ambitious and rigid production timeline. 6 days. 6 days to fully produce a 20-minute episode of an animated sitcom. To say it's an ambitious production schedule would be an understatement. You might think that working on a show that's made in such a short amount of time would be a very stressful task, and a very hard one to pull off at that. And thanks to the documentary 6 Days to Air, we know that's the case. The documentary covers the creators as they make the premiere for season 15, Human Centipede. And man, you get to see everything! The inception of the episode, the fragmented ideas being boarded, the back and forth with their broadcasters, the animation process, the voice acting, the joy of what they made, the struggles with the episode, the stress as the deadline gets closer and closer, and you don't know how to write this scene or that scene, and everybody's waiting on you. You don't just see it, you feel it. The editing, pacing, and music for the documentary does a fantastic job of making you feel what the creators are feeling. You feel the fun of the writer's room. You feel the stress of that creeping deadline getting closer. You feel the euphoria of the episode getting done, but the exhausted state that the crew are in. And honestly, that's all I'm gonna say about this show's production timeline, because 6 Days to Air is literally my favorite documentary of all time, and I would be doing both the creators of it and you, the viewer, a disservice by not recommending you go and watch that instead if you have even the slightest interest in either South Park or making TV. Go and watch 6 Days to Air. There's plenty of re-uploads of it on YouTube, and it's honestly my all-time favorite documentary. And that's not even because it's about South Park, it's just that good. In recent years, though, South Park has shown its ambition in an entirely new way, by breaking off from its sitcom roots and making episodes with storylines that carry over from previous adventures. This started in season 18, where episode 1 went right into episode 2 the following week, despite both episodes being their own storylines. The season admittedly ends in a really messy way, where they just tack some storylines from the last 9 episodes into a final scene, and it feels really inorganic and rushed. Luckily, the next season takes this concept and aces it, creating one of the best seasons not only of the show, but of all TV. Season 19 kicks down the door and immediately introduces a new character who's now a mainstay in modern South Park. PC Principal is a characterization of the real-world rise of political correctness, which puts South Park in a weird spot due to how offensive it's known to get. If you think they're just using him to make fun of PC culture, however, well, okay, you aren't entirely wrong, but they also give him a great character arc while commentating on the people who use PC culture for their own benefit. The season also has themes of gentrification, advertising, and the presidential election. Oh jeez. In episode 2, Mr. Garrison is fired from the school and goes on to become a presidential candidate, and throughout the rest of the season ends up becoming the place-in for Trump. Season 21 definitely drove his character into the ground, but in season 19 the joke was pretty funny. I wouldn't say season 19 is where you should start with the show, but I do think it's a must-watch when you know the characters a bit. While season 19 was the show's ambitious peak to me, the later seasons experiment with serialization as well, and most of it is really good. Season 22 is a personal favorite of mine. So yeah, South Park is really ambitious, and funny, and a masterclass in storytelling. But it's one more thing too. South Park is a very human show, and that comes with all the downsides and upsides that being human inherently has. Downsides? We all make mistakes. The fan favorite episode Man Bear Pig is one that sadly aged in its messaging. The episode itself is funny as hell, but they use Man Bear Pig as a fake creature to resemble climate change, basically saying it doesn't exist. This is obviously wrong. Science has shown for decades now that global warming and climate change is a real threat to human life on a global scale. And this episode, while it's fine on its own merits, is a blatant case of science denialism and arguably one of the biggest blunders to the show as a whole. I said one of. I get that the episode was mainly there to poke fun at Al Gore, but this isn't the first time Matt and Trey didn't really take global warming seriously. But one of the upsides to being human is that we evolve and we learn, as Matt and Trey did, not only behind the scenes, but in the narrative of the show as well. Season 22's Time to Get Cereal and Nobody Got Cereal are episodes about Man Bear Pig and Al Gore again, but this time, he's real. Man Bear Pig, not Al Gore. I'm pretty sure that's a fictional character. It's actually a great commentary on the issue, with some dialogue that pokes fun at people who deny the science, which is very ironic, but hey, good on you guys for catching up. Wisecrack did a great video about this 5 years back that goes a lot more in depth into these two episodes that you should definitely check out after this. Just wait like 2 more minutes. I'm not saying that Matt and Trey are innocent. They still made these episodes and probably convinced a few people that climate change isn't a serious problem. However, they looked at facts and world events that are happening in the modern day and changed their minds on the matter, making 2 episodes and then a special that further explores and comments on climate change. Not only proving it to be a real problem in the canon of the show, but actually having some really interesting comments about the problem. Which is the big point that I'm trying to make here. This isn't a show where everything, not even the creator's own thoughts, are set in stone. Like us, Matt and Trey learn new information and their opinions change, and since most episodes of South Park are a reflection or a reaction to recent news, we learn in real time what their thoughts are. Sometimes they don't even know what their thoughts are until the end of the episode's production. It makes each episode of South Park feel less like a statement and more like a conversation, which is my way of saying this show feels human. Truth be told, I've held myself back this video. South Park is one of my all-time favourite shows, and if I talked about every single thing I wanted to, I'd double the length of the Pixar video. I haven't talked about the animation, I haven't talked about the amazing representation, and I haven't talked about the movie. So I'm going to leave it here, but I will make more South Park videos in the future, and probably mention the show about a couple dozen times in future videos that have nothing to do with the show. I love South Park that much, but I am going to leave it here. So, thank you for watching, and if you don't mind, I think it's time that I get back to making videos about something else. I looked away for 20 minutes, when did all this get here?! Oh cool, you made it to the end of the video. Hope you liked it. If you did, there's an outtake reel, the uncensored version of the episode, and the script I read from all on the Patreon for only $2. Pledging will also get your name in the credits of our podcast Signal Received and in our live stream series Satalive. Well, okay, when the live streams continue, anyway. Link in the description if you want to donate. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. Okay, cool, bye!